Hey everybody, KMO here, and Financial Times. My 1 month subscription for $1 ran out, and I went to cancel, and they said, "Oh, why are you canceling?" And I said, "Too expensive." And of course, they offered me a lower price, less than half their actual, upfront asking price. So I went ahead and got a second month. They have a series right now. I guess it's an ongoing series, but they have a bunch of new installments in it, and it's basically life in 2050, according to the Financial Times. What will life be like in 2050? I just started re-listening to Brian Reese's The Fourth Age, and the Fourth Age is really the fourth age of technology. Byron Reese says that really it is technology that basically governs how we live, how we structure our societies, how we make a living, how we live, how we inhabit the landscape. And so he's got these four ages. The first age is the age of fire and language. And you might not think of language as a technology, but you need to reframe your definition of technology, because it absolutely is. It is a collection of techniques, a way of doing things. It is a technology. So fire and language allowed our hunter-gatherer lifestyles. It's basically what made being a Neanderthal or some contemporary to the Neanderthals different from Australopithecus. Very different lifestyle. The next set of technologies, which really reshaped the way humans organized, their way of living, our way of living, was farming and writing, which gave rise to cities, and cities gave rise to good stuff like, the division of labor, specialization of labor, but also bad stuff like slavery. And then the next set of technologies which changed the way we inhabit the landscape were industrialism and fossil fuels, which gave rise to the Industrial Revolution and much of what we think of as being the shape of the modern world. It also dramatically changed the way we fought wars, and was the beginning of the end for the romantic notion that war makes a man, that if you happen to live your adult life and you never fought in a war, that you had missed out on something important, on some necessary aspect of life, to be a fully realized human being. World War I really kicked the shit out of us in a way that we psychologically just were not prepared to accept. And then World War II, with the nuclear cherry on top, really drove home that we can't do war like we used to. We have to find ways either to do it smaller, in a more strategic and decisive way, or through proxies, or better yet, not at all. And, the nuclear weapons technology really shaped the latter half of the 20th century. And technology can change very quickly. The Wright brothers took their first heavier-than-air flight, I think it was 1903, something like that. And then Neil Armstrong walked on the moon less than 70 years later. 1969, he stepped out onto the moon and flubbed the line that he had prepared. One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. But we don't know. Technology really has an enormous impact. I would say it determines, maybe that's too strong a word, but I'm not backing off from it. It determines how we live. It determines the structure of our governments. Marxism swept part of the world very quickly. What part? The poor, rural, backwards parts of the world. Places where there are already, industrial economies and big population centers, they weren't biting. They were not interested. So, Marxist communism took hold in Russia, in parts of Central America, China, London, the Brits, where it came out of the mind of a German guy, but he was living in England at the time, and he was looking around at England when he was describing, the emergence of capitalism and the workings of capitalism. They were not interested. United States, not interested, to put it mildly. So technology, it can move very quickly, but it can also, certain technological breakthroughs which we expect don't come on schedule. Technologies that, seem promising don't mature on the time frame that we expect. There's Roy Amara, who coined Amaras Law, and I know people are very critical of it, and they have good reason to be, but you've probably heard it. We tend to overestimate the impact of a new technology in the short term, and then we underestimate its impact in the long term. And another way to say that is the hype cycle. When you hear about a new technology, or when there's a lot of talk about some new technological breakthrough or some new technological paradigm, there's a peak of heightened or overinflated expectations. And then things don't pan out according to the overinflated expectations, and you fall down into this trough of disillusionment. And then eventually, the technology matures, and it finds its killer app, and it works its way into society, and it has long-lasting change. But that's after a period, a fairly long period in some cases, of bitter disappointment, and a lot of people saying that the technology was all hype to begin with, that there was never a there. My point is this: if you think what the world is going to look like in 2050, that means a couple different things. Or, pick any date that's more than a couple decades out. One, what technologies are going to bear fruit, how quickly, what the major applications will be, and two, either one of two things. How people are going to decide to govern themselves. Who's going to win elections. What sorts of parties are going to gain power and which are going to lose power. Or that politics don't matter at all, that it's all just a circus, that it's all just a show to keep us distracted, and that really it's finance and technology that determines everything, and that politics are largely irrelevant. I don't know that that's the case, though. I'm sure most people don't believe that's the case. If you are really excited about a particular candidate, or you really, really hate Donald Trump, you don't believe that politics is all just a show. You don't believe that it doesn't make any difference who gets elected, what parties rise, what parties fall, what political ideas gain traction in the mass consciousness and which fall out of favor. We like to think that these things matter, and I think they probably do to some extent. Then there's other stuff like climate change. There is no consensus on how badly it is going to affect us, and how many species will be killed, how much we're going to have to pull back from low-lying shorelines. There's all kinds of things that they haven't been resolved yet, and it seems like they're going to be important. So to say what 2050 is going to look like, even in broad outlines, just seems really, really implausible to me, particularly on the technology front. I remember reading in popular science magazines back in the late 1980s about all of the wonderful applications for room temperature superconducting materials, which is to say materials that conduct electricity without losing any, without resistance, basically, without resistance turning the flow of electrons into heat, either deliberately to create heat or waste heat, which is if you transmit electricity over a very long distance through wires, those wires are not superconducting. Some of that electricity is translated into heat, and it just dissipates, and that energy is wasted. Right now, about 50% of the electricity that is generated in electricity generating plants doesn't actually get used by anybody. It goes to waste in one way or another. Well, that was the 1980s. That was 30 years ago. And as far as I know, we are no closer to room temperature superconductivity than we were then. Lithium as the basis for batteries, to my mind, is not ready for prime time. It's okay for a cell phone, but it's not up to... a lithium-powered car, an electric car that depends on a lithium battery, is just not a replacement for an internal combustion engine that runs on gasoline. It just does not have the range. For me, an electric car, it would be okay for tooling around town here, but if I wanted to, drive 10 hours to go see my kids, it's just not practical. And I don't think it's going to be practical as long as lithium is the paradigm. But how long will lithium be the paradigm? There is, as far as I know, no way to predict the advance of material science. People have been looking for that superconducting material for decades, haven't found it. People have been looking for better battery technology materials for, I don't know, possibly as long. And who knows? I mean, when did you first start hearing about graphene and carbon nanotubes and all the amazing applications that were going to revolutionize just about every sector of technology, particularly computing technology? It's been many years. I have yet to see, you know, a graphene-based PC. You know, we've been hearing about quantum computing for how long? I don't know, a decade at least. I don't see any commercial applications for it. And, you know, the big application for quantum computing is the one thing that we really don't want. You know, it's an innovation that we don't want, and that is the perfect code breaker. It just undoes all cryptography. You know, it's your Bitcoin killer. It's your public key encryption killer. Who wants that? I don't want that. It's not particularly useful for AI, as I understand it. I mean, I certainly don't claim any expertise about AI or quantum computing. I am an interested lay observer, not a participant in the development of the technology, for sure. Anyway, this whole notion of I know or we know, even in vague, broad strokes, what 2050 will look like, I'm unimpressed. It seems hubristic to me. All right, tomorrow is the big debate. And I'm gonna, Wednesday, 3 teeth right across the front bottom here come out. Oh, yuck. Wish me strength. I mean, I'm sure I will be properly anesthetized. It's just going to be a shock to hear what my voice sounds like. I mean, a good many of our consonants are made by, you know, flicking the tongue up against the teeth. Now, I guess any sound that you can make with putting your tongue against your bottom teeth, you could do with the top teeth. It's just going to be an adjustment. It's going to be an adjustment. Anyway, tomorrow night is the next Democratic debate, so I'll be talking about Andrew Yang again. Probably get a few views. Talk to you soon.